Sergeant Micah Thornberry had the worst singing voice in the entire Marine Corps, and on this Christmas Eve, he was proving it to everyone at Combat Outpost Kestrel. His rendition of Silent Night sounded like a wounded animal calling for help, but the 40 Marines crammed into the Chow Hall did not care. They laughed. They clapped. Some threw balled-up napkins at his head, while he clutched an imaginary microphone and swayed with exaggerated emotion. For one night, in this frozen valley in Kiener Province, they were allowed to forget where they were. But Corporal Theodora Vance was not in the Chow Hall. She stood alone in the supply building 60 meters away, watching through a frost-edged window, counting. She counted the Marines visible through the Chow Hall windows. She counted the seconds between guard rotations at the towers. She counted her own heartbeats, which had been running too fast for the last hour. Before we continue with the story, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from tonight. Maybe you've spent a holiday far from the people you love, or maybe you know someone who has served overseas during Christmas. Something felt wrong. Teddy could not explain it, could not point to evidence that would satisfy anyone who asked. But her instincts, the ones she had spent 3 years trying to bury beneath requisition forms and inventory spreadsheets, were screaming at her like they had not screamed since a different life. She turned from the window and moved through the supply building with an efficiency that seemed excessive for a clerk. Her fingers found the small photograph tucked into her breast pocket. She did not remove it. She never removed it where anyone might see. But touching it reminded her why she was here, why she had chosen to become invisible, why Corporal Theodora Vance had to remain exactly as boring as everyone believed her to be. The supply building door opened behind her, and Teddy pivoted with a speed that made Private First Class Elias Croft take a startled step backward. "Whoa, Corporal," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "It is just me. Did not mean to sneak up on you." Teddy forced her shoulders to relax. "You did not sneak. I was distracted. What do you need, Croft?" The 19-year-old Marine shifted his weight, suddenly looking even younger than his years. He held a crumpled piece of paper in his hands. "I was wondering if you could help me with something." "It is stupid. Never mind." He started to turn away, and Teddy surprised herself by stopping him. "Show me." Croft hesitated, then handed over the paper. "It is a letter. To my mom. She has been sick, and I wanted to write something for Christmas, but I am not good with words. Everything I write sounds wrong." Teddy looked at the letter. The handwriting was cramped, the sentences awkward, but the emotion behind them was unmistakable. A son trying to tell his mother he loved her from 7,000 miles away. "Sit down," Teddy said, gesturing to a crate. "Let's work on this together." For the next 20 minutes, Teddy helped Croft find the words he could not find alone. She asked him questions about his mother, about their memories together, about what he wanted her to know. Slowly, the letter transformed into something real, something that would make a sick woman smile on Christmas morning. "This is perfect," Croft said, reading the final draft with wonder in his voice. "How did you know what to say?" Teddy almost told him the truth. Almost told him that she had written a similar letter once, to a 4-year-old daughter who had never read it because her mother was supposed to be dead. Instead, she said, "I just listened. The words were always yours." Croft left with his letter clutched like treasure, and Teddy returned to the window. The celebration continued in the Chow Hall. Thornberry had moved on to "Oh Holy Night," and somehow it sounded even worse. Gunnery Sergeant Roland Fisk appeared in the Chow Hall doorway, scanning until his eyes found the supply building. Even at this distance, Teddy could see his expression. He wanted her to join them. She would not. Teddy turned her attention to the ridgeline, 400 meters north. The mountains rose sharp against the star-filled sky, their slopes lost in shadow. She had been watching those shadows all evening. Nothing moved. Nothing should move. But twice now she had seen something, a shape that did not belong, a shadow that shifted when the wind was still. She keyed her radio. "Tower 3, this is Supply. Do you have eyes on the northern ridge?" The response came back casual, almost bored. "Supply, Tower 3. Negative movement. All quiet up here. You seeing ghosts, Corporal?" "Maybe," Teddy replied. "Keep watching." She released the radio and stared at the ridgeline. Her instincts were never wrong. They had kept her alive through 6 years of operations that did not officially exist. They had warned her in Syria, in Yemen, in a dozen places she could never speak about. And right now, those instincts were telling her that death was watching this outpost from the darkness. In the chow hall, Thornberry hid a note so wrong that the entire room erupted in laughter. Marines banged on tables and cheered. Someone started a chant demanding he sing Jingle Bells next. On the northern ridgeline, a man named Qasser Mohammadi lowered his binoculars and smiled. He had waited 3 years for this night. 3 years since an American ghost had murdered his brother. 3 years of planning, of gathering fighters, of waiting for the perfect moment. Christmas, when Americans were soft, when they gathered together and forgot they were at war. He raised his hand, and 40 fighters readied their weapons. The first RPG streaked through the darkness like a falling star, aimed directly at Tower 3. The explosion tore through Tower 3 with a sound that Teddy felt in her chest before she heard it with her ears. The wooden structure disintegrated into flame and splinters, and 2 Marines who had been standing watch vanished in the blast. For one frozen heartbeat, the entire outpost went silent. Then the world came apart. Automatic weapons fire erupted from 3 directions at once. The northern ridgeline lit up with muzzle flashes like deadly fireflies. The eastern slope joined moments later, then the west. Tracers crisscrossed the compound in glowing red lines, punching through walls, shattering windows, finding flesh. In the chow hall, chaos erupted. Marines dove for cover, reaching for weapons that were not there, because this was supposed to be a celebration. This was supposed to be safe. Sergeant Thornberry moved without hesitation, grabbing the 2 youngest Marines and shoving them toward the floor. "Get down," he screamed, his terrible singing voice now cutting through the gunfire with command. Everyone get down and crawl to the exits. He was still pushing others to safety when the burst caught him across the chest. Thornberry staggered, looked down at the blood spreading across his uniform with an expression of confusion, and fell. His lips moved one final time, forming words that might have been a prayer or might have been the next line of "O Holy Night." Then he was gone. Teddy did not see Thornberry die. She was already moving, her body shifting into patterns that Corporal Theodora Vance had never learned but that another woman had drilled 10,000 times. She killed the lights in the supply building with a single motion, plunging herself into darkness. Then she moved to the back corner, to a crate marked winter rations that had arrived 8 months ago and had never been opened by anyone except her. The lock was a combination. Her fingers found the numbers without conscious thought. The lid opened to reveal not rations but foam padding, and beneath the foam, pieces of equipment that did not belong to any supply clerk. A rifle disassembled, custom-built, chambered for rounds that could reach out and touch targets at distances most shooters could not imagine. A scope that cost more than most cars. A ghillie hood in desert tan. A suppressor that reduced a gunshot to a whisper. Teddy stared at these pieces of her former life. 3 years she had run from them. 3 years she had pretended to be someone else, someone ordinary, someone who could not kill a man at 800 meters while controlling her heartbeat between shots. 3 years of trying to stay dead. The chow hall was burning now. She could hear screaming. Her hands began assembling the rifle. The supply building door burst open, and Lance Corporal Destiny Okafor stormed in with her service pistol raised. She swept the darkness until she found Teddy crouched over the open crate, and her expression shifted from fear to confusion to anger. "What the hell are you doing?" Okafor demanded. "We are under attack, and you are hiding in here playing with boxes? Thornberry is dead. People are dying out there." Teddy did not look up. Her hands continued their work, each piece clicking into place with mechanical precision. "I am not hiding." "Then what are you doing?" Okafor stepped closer, her eyes adjusting to the darkness, and she saw what Teddy was assembling. Her voice dropped to something between whisper and accusation. "That is not standard issue. That is not even close to standard issue. Who the hell are you?" The rifle came together with a final click. Teddy stood, and something in the way she moved made Okafor take an involuntary step backward. The supply clerk was gone. The woman who stood in her place held the weapon like it was part of her own body. Someone who should have stayed dead, Teddy said. She pulled the ghillie hood over her head and moved toward the ladder that led to the roof access. Stay here or follow me. But if you follow, you stay quiet and you do exactly what I say. Okafor hesitated for only a second. Then she followed. The roof of the supply building offered a clear view of hell. The outpost was taking fire from 3 directions, and the Marines were scattered, pinned down, unable to mount a coordinated defense. The motor pool was burning. Tower 1 was returning fire, but would not last long against the volume coming from the ridgeline. The medical station had Marines crawling toward it, dragging wounded. Teddy counted the muzzle flashes on the northern ridge. At least 15 shooters in that sector alone. She counted the eastern slope. Another 12. The west had maybe 10 more. Close to 40 fighters total, coordinated, disciplined, attacking in a pattern designed to overwhelm. This was not a random assault. This was planned. She settled into a prone position, the rifle finding her shoulder like greeting an old friend. The scope came to her eye, and the chaos below transformed into something manageable, something that could be understood in terms of distances and wind speed and target priority. The machine gunner on the northern ridge was the most dangerous. His weapon was chewing through the compound, keeping Marines pinned while others advanced. Teddy found him in her scope, adjusted for the distance, felt her heartbeat slow to a rhythm she had not felt in 3 years. "What are you doing?" Okafor whispered. Teddy exhaled half a breath and held it. "My job." She squeezed the trigger. The rifle whispered. 400 meters away, the machine gunner jerked once and collapsed over his weapon. Okafor made a sound that was not quite words. Teddy was already moving to her second target. Another squeeze. Another whisper. Another body falling on the ridgeline. Third target. The rifle spoke again. On the northern ridge, the disciplined assault began to falter. Fighters looked around in confusion, trying to understand why their brothers were dying without any sound of return fire. Teddy chambered another round and found her fourth target. She had not spoken her old call sign in 3 years, had not even let herself think it. But now, with the rifle warm against her cheek and death waiting in her crosshairs, the words came out in a voice that Corporal Theodora Vance had never used. "Your ghost is active." The fifth fighter fell before the others understood they were being hunted. Teddy watched through her scope as confusion rippled through the enemy positions on the northern ridge. Men who had been firing with confidence moments ago now ducked behind rocks, scanning for a threat they could not locate. The suppressor reduced her shots to soft coughs that the chaos of battle swallowed completely. To them, it must have seemed like their brothers were simply dropping dead. She shifted her aim east, where a team of 3 fighters was advancing toward the motor pool. Marines were trapped inside that burning structure, and if the enemy reached them, the killing would be close and brutal. Teddy found the lead fighter in her scope. He was young, maybe 20, moving with the eager aggression of someone who had never faced a real marksman. She exhaled and squeezed. He dropped. The 2 behind him froze, looking at their fallen comrade with incomprehension. She took the second before he could move. The third turned to run, and she let him. Let him carry the fear back to his commanders. 6 confirmed, Teddy murmured, more to herself than to Okafor. Maybe 34 remaining. Okafor lay beside her on the roof, pressed flat against the cold surface, breathing in short gasps. She had not spoken since Teddy started shooting. Her eyes were fixed on the carnage below, but every few seconds they darted to the woman beside her, as if checking that she was real. "How are you doing this?" Okafor finally whispered. "Nobody can shoot like this. The distance, the darkness, the wind. This is impossible." Teddy did not answer. She was already tracking her next target, a fighter setting up a rocket launcher on the eastern slope. If he got that weapon operational, he could put a round straight into a medical station where wounded Marines were gathering. She calculated the distance at just over 450 meters. The wind was gusting from a northwest at maybe 8 miles per hour. She adjusted her aim, felt the familiar calm settle over her mind, and fired. The rocket launcher fell from dead hands. 7. Below, The tide of battle was shifting. The enemy advance had stalled as fighters tried to understand why their assault was falling apart. Marines who had been pinned down began returning fire with renewed energy. Gunnery Sergeant Fisk had rallied a group near the command post, directing fire toward the western slope with a kind of steady competence that came from 2 decades of combat experience. But Fisk was exposed. Teddy saw him standing when he should have been crouching, leading when he should have been commanding from cover. An enemy marksman on the ridgeline saw the same thing. She watched the distant figure adjust his aim toward the gunnery sergeant. Teddy shifted her rifle. The enemy marksman was partially concealed behind a boulder, only his head and shoulder visible. The shot was difficult, but not impossible. She fired half a second before he did. His round went wide, sparking off a concrete barrier 3 feet from Fisk. Her round found its mark. The gunnery sergeant would never know how close he had come to death, and Teddy preferred it that way. 8. Staff Sergeant Yolanda Briggs and 4 Marines were still trapped in the motor pool. Teddy could see them through gaps in the burning structure, huddled behind vehicles, unable to move without crossing open ground that was swept by enemy fire. 3 fighters had taken position behind a supply truck, pouring rounds into the motor pool whenever anyone tried to break out. Teddy shifted her position slightly, finding a better angle on the supply truck. The first fighter was easy, standing too tall behind the truck bed. He fell across the tailgate. The second ducked at the sound of his friend's body hitting metal, but he ducked the wrong direction, exposing himself to Teddy's line of sight. She corrected and fired. The third fighter was smarter, pressing himself flat against the ground, but he had positioned himself beside the truck's fuel tank. Teddy put a round through the tank. The explosion was not large, but it was enough. The fighter scrambled away from the flames, exposing himself for the 2 seconds Teddy needed. 11. The motor pool Marines saw their chance. Briggs led them out at a sprint, crossing the open ground while Teddy provided cover. A fighter rose from concealment on the eastern slope to take aim at the fleeing group, and Teddy dropped him before he could fire. 12. Briggs and her team reached the medical station, and Teddy allowed herself a single breath of relief. But relief was a luxury she could not afford. The enemy was adapting. The fighters on the northern ridge were no longer firing blindly into the compound. They were scanning the outpost, looking for the source of their losses. Looking for her. A burst of automatic fire stitched across the supply building roof, forcing Teddy to roll away from her position. Okafor yelped and pressed herself flatter against the surface. "They have spotted us," Okafor hissed. "They have spotted something," Teddy corrected. She was already moving to a new position at the far corner of the roof. "They do not know what yet." She settled back into her shooting stance and found the fighter who had sprayed the roof. He was gesturing to others, pointing toward the supply building, organizing a response. A leader. Teddy put her crosshairs on his chest and fired. 13. On the northern ridge, a man lowered his binoculars and spoke into a radio. His voice carried the calm of someone who had commanded men in battle many times before. Qasser Mohammadi had lost a third of his assault force in less than 10 minutes. He should have been furious. Instead, he was smiling. "Find the sniper," he said into the radio. "This outpost has no snipers on their roster. I checked personally, which means someone interesting is hiding among these Marines." He raised the binoculars again and studied the supply building roof. The shooting pattern was familiar. The precision was familiar. He had seen this kind of work before, 3 years ago, when an American Ghost had reached across 800 meters of Syrian desert to take his brother's life. "It cannot be," he murmured. "She is dead." But the bodies of his fighters told a different story. Qasser Mohammadi had planned this attack for 6 months. He had bribed an Afghan contractor who serviced the outpost to provide detailed information about guard rotations, weapon placements, and personnel. He had gathered 40 of his most experienced fighters, men who had survived a decade of war against the Americans. He had chosen Christmas Eve specifically because his intelligence told him the Marines would be distracted, celebrating, soft. The intelligence had said nothing about a sniper. He watched another of his men fall on the eastern slope, dead before the sound of the shot reached anyone's ears. 14 now. 14 fighters lost to a ghost he could not see. The assault that should have overwhelmed this outpost in minutes had ground to a halt, his men pinned down by a single shooter who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Kasser knew this feeling. He had felt it once before, in Syria, when his brother Farhad had led a convoy through what should have been safe territory. Farhad had been a commander, a leader, a man who inspired loyalty through strength and conviction. He had also been a man with secrets that Kasser had never questioned because family did not question family. The American ghost had killed Farhad with a single shot from 800 meters. One moment his brother was alive, laughing at something one of his lieutenants had said. The next moment he was gone, and the sniper had vanished like smoke in the wind. They told Kasser that the ghost had died 2 years later. A helicopter crash in Yemen, no survivors. He had celebrated that news, had thanked God for delivering justice. But now, watching his carefully planned assault crumble under precise, methodical fire, doubt crept into his mind like poison. The shooting pattern was identical. The patience, the target selection, the way each shot seemed to arrive from nowhere, killing leaders and key weapons operators first before moving to secondary targets. This was not some lucky Marine with a rifle. This was a professional. This was an artist. This was her. Kasser raised his radio. All units, focus fire on the supply building. Suppress that position. I want mortars on that roof in 2 minutes. On the supply building roof, Teddy heard the change in enemy fire before she understood it. The scattered shooting that had been sweeping the compound suddenly concentrated, rounds pounding into the supply building from 3 directions. She rolled away from the roof edge as bullets chewed through the spot where she had been lying moments before. "They're targeting us," Okafor shouted over the noise. Teddy's mind raced through calculations. The enemy had identified her general position, but concentrated fire meant they still did not have her exact location. They were trying to suppress her, keep her head down, buy time for something else. Something worse. She scanned the ridgeline and found what she was looking for. A mortar team setting up behind a cluster of boulders 400 meters north. 2 men working with practiced efficiency, assembling the tube, while a third prepared rounds. If they got that weapon operational, the supply building roof would become a death trap. "I need you to spot for me," Teddy said to Okafor. "The mortar team on the ridge, behind the 3 large boulders. Do you see them?" Okafor raised her head just enough to look, then ducked as a burst of fire snapped overhead. "I see them. 3 men. I'm going to take them. When I fire, tell me where my rounds land. If I miss, I need corrections fast." Okafor stared at her. "I have never spotted before." "Then you are about to learn." Teddy adjusted her position, using a ventilation unit for cover, and found the mortar team in her scope. The angle was bad, the cover was worse, and enemy rounds were impacting all around her. She slowed her breathing and blocked out everything except the 3 figures preparing to kill her. The first shot took the man holding the mortar rounds. Okafor flinched at the distant impact. "Hit," Okafor said, her voice shaking. "He is down." The second man dove for cover behind the boulders, but the third kept working on the tube, either brave or desperate or too focused on his task to register the danger. Teddy shifted her aim and fired. "Hit," Okafor reported. 2 down. The third fighter had wedged himself into a gap between boulders. Teddy could see a sliver of his shoulder, but nothing vital. She waited, counting seconds, watching for any movement. "He is reaching for something," Okafor said. "I think he is going for the rounds." The fighter stretched his arm toward the fallen mortar ammunition, exposing his head for half a second. Teddy fired. "Hit." "He is down." All 3 down. Teddy allowed herself a moment to breathe. 17 confirmed kills. But the concentrated fire on her position had not stopped, and she could hear shouting from the enemy lines. They were regrouping, adapting, preparing something new. "Okafor, I need to move. This position is compromised." "Move where?" Teddy scanned the compound below. The command post was too exposed. The chow hall was still burning. The medical station was full of wounded. Her eyes settled on the water tower, near the center of the outpost, a rusted structure that rose 20 feet above the other buildings. "There," she said. "Better angles, harder to hit. But the climb is exposed." Okafor followed her gaze. "That is suicide. You will be in the open for 10 seconds at least, which is why you're going to cover me." Teddy handed Okafor her sidearm. "Get to the base of the tower. Lay down fire on anyone who targets me during the climb." "I'm not a marksman," Okafor protested. "You do not need to hit anyone. You just need to make them duck." Teddy moved toward the roof access ladder, then paused. Below, in the narrow alley between the supply building and the generator housing, she saw a figure huddled against the wall. Even in the chaos and darkness, she recognized him. Private Croft was pinned down directly in her path. Teddy did not hesitate. She was down the ladder and moving through the supply building before Okafor could protest. The plan had been simple. Get to the water tower, establish a new position, continue the fight. But plans meant nothing when a 19-year-old kid with a letter to his mother was trapped in a kill zone. She exited through the back door, staying low, using the generator housing for cover. The alley between buildings was narrow and dark, but enemy tracers lit the sky above like deadly fireworks. Croft was pressed against the wall 15 feet ahead, his hands covering his head, his body shaking with each impact that struck the buildings around him. "Croft," Teddy called out, keeping her voice low but firm. "Look at me." The young Marine raised his head, and she saw terror in his eyes. The kind of terror that froze muscles and shut down thinking. He had probably never been in combat before tonight. Most of the Marines at this outpost had not. They were support personnel, administrators, mechanics. They had trained for this, but training was not the same as bullets snapping past your face while friends died screaming. "I cannot move," Croft said. His voice cracked. "Every time I try, they shoot at me." Teddy scanned the angles. The fire pinning Croft was coming from the eastern slope, fighters who had repositioned after she eliminated their comrades near the motor pool. She could see their muzzle flashes, could calculate their positions, but her rifle was meant for precision work, not suppression. If she engaged them from here, she would give away her position and draw fire onto both herself and Croft. She made a decision that the woman she used to be would have called tactically unsound. She moved into the open. "Croft, when I reach you, we run together. Straight to the water tower. Do not stop, do not look back, do not think. Just run." She covered the 15 feet in seconds, sliding into position beside him just as a burst of fire stitched the wall above their heads. Concrete fragments rained down on them, and Teddy felt a sharp sting across her left arm. She looked down and saw blood seeping through her sleeve, a shallow gash from shrapnel or debris. "You are hit," Croft said, his eyes widening. "It is nothing." Teddy grabbed his arm. "On 3 we move. 1, 2, 3. She hauled him to his feet, and they ran. The world became a blur of shadows and muzzle flashes and the desperate rhythm of boots on gravel. Fire followed them, rounds impacting the ground at their heels, sparking off metal, punching through the thin walls of structures they passed. Teddy pushed Croft ahead of her, keeping her body between him and the most likely angles of attack. They were 10 feet from the water tower when a mortar round hit. The explosion lifted Teddy off her feet and threw her into the tower's support struts. She heard Croft screaming, heard the whine of shrapnel cutting through the air, felt something hot tear into her left shoulder. Then she was on the ground, gasping, her ears ringing, her vision swimming with spots of light. "Move," she told herself. "Move or die." She forced her body to respond, rolling onto her stomach, searching for her rifle. It lay 5 feet away, partially buried in debris. Croft was beside her, alive but stunned, a gash across his forehead, bleeding freely. Behind them, she could hear shouting. Enemy fighters advancing, sensing wounded prey. Teddy crawled toward her rifle, every movement sending fire through her wounded shoulder. Her left arm was not responding properly, the shrapnel damage worse than she had initially thought. She reached the rifle with her right hand, pulled it close, and turned to face the direction of the enemy advance. 3 fighters emerged from the darkness, moving fast, weapons raised. Teddy brought her rifle up with one arm, An awkward angle. No time to aim properly. She fired twice, dropped one, forced the others into cover. But the rifle was designed for precision shooting, not close-quarters combat. She had 5 rounds remaining. Corporal, Croft gasped, crawling toward her. "What do we do?" Teddy looked at the water tower above them. The ladder was 8 feet away. She could not climb it, not with one functional arm. She looked at her rifle. 5 rounds against at least 25 remaining fighters. The mathematics of survival were not in her favor. She had been in worse situations. In Syria, she had spent 3 days in a collapsed building with 2 broken ribs and an enemy patrol searching for her. In Yemen, she had walked 40 miles through desert with a bullet in her thigh. She had survived because she refused to accept death as an outcome. But those times, she had only herself to protect. Teddy positioned herself between Croft and the direction of enemy fire. She could see more shapes moving in the darkness, fighters closing in from multiple angles. Her shoulder screamed with pain. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. "Croft," she said quietly, "I need you to listen to me. We're going to die." He whispered. "No." Teddy checked her rifle. 4 rounds now. She must have miscounted. "You're not going to die tonight. I made a promise to myself a long time ago. No more dying on Christmas." She thought of the photograph in her pocket. Her daughter, Noelle, named for the holiday she was born on. 3 years since Teddy had seen her face except in that worn image. 3 years of hiding, of pretending, of staying dead so that her enemies would never find the one person she loved more than her own life. "Corporal," Croft said, his voice steadier now. "Do you have family?" Teddy sighted on a shadow moving between buildings. She fired, and the shadow fell. 3 rounds. "A daughter," she said. "She is 7 now. She thinks I died in a helicopter crash." Croft was silent for a moment. "That is why you are here." "Hiding." Teddy fired again, missed, cursed under her breath. 2 rounds. "Yes." "Will you ever see her again?" The question cut deeper than the shrapnel in her shoulder. Teddy had asked herself that question every day for 3 years. The answer had always been the same. Someday. It was safe. When her enemies stopped looking. When she could emerge from the grave she had dug for herself. But someday kept getting further away, and her daughter kept getting older, and the woman in the photograph kept becoming more of a stranger. "I'm going to try," Teddy said. She spotted movement near the supply building. 2 fighters preparing to advance. She had 2 rounds and 2 targets. No margin for error. She exhaled, steadied her one good arm, and fired twice. Both fighters dropped. Empty. Teddy dropped her rifle and drew her sidearm. Then she realized she had given it to Okafor. She was out of weapons, out of options, and enemy fighters were still closing in. "Croft," she said, "when I move, you run for the medical station. Do not argue. Do not wait for me. Just run." "I'm not leaving you," he said. It was not a request. The first enemy fighter rounded the corner of the generator housing and raised his weapon toward Teddy. She calculated the distance, the angle, the time it would take him to pull the trigger. She had maybe half a second to act, and no weapon to act with. Then the fighter's head snapped back, and he crumpled to the ground. Okafor emerged from the shadows near the water tower, Teddy's sidearm extended in a 2-handed grip, her face a mask of controlled terror. She fired twice more at shapes moving in the darkness, not hitting anything but forcing the advancing fighters to scatter for cover. "I thought I told you to cover me from the tower," Teddy said. "Plans change." Okafor slid into position beside them, pressing a medical kit into Teddy's hands. "Found this in the supply building. Figured you might need it." She also held something else. Teddy's rifle, retrieved from where it had fallen during the mortar blast. "And I found this," Okafor continued. "But you are out of ammunition." "Not quite." Teddy reached into her cargo pocket and produced a single magazine. 20 rounds. Her last reserve. "I was saving these." "For what?" "For when things got desperate." Okafor looked at the blood-soaking Teddy's shoulder, at the fighters regrouping in the darkness, at the burning buildings and scattered bodies that had been a peaceful outpost 2 hours ago. "This does not count as desperate." Teddy almost smiled. She took the rifle, checked the action, and loaded the fresh magazine. Then she turned to Croft. "Get to the medical station. Take Okafor with you. I'm not leaving, Okafor said. You need a spotter. You can barely lift that rifle with one arm. She was right. Teddy's left arm hung useless at her side, the shrapnel damage severe enough that she could not feel her fingers. Shooting one-handed at range was possible, but far from ideal. Having someone to spot targets and call corrections would double her effectiveness. Fine, Teddy said. Croft, go. Now. This time the young Marine did not argue. He sprinted toward the medical station while Teddy and Okafor provided cover. Two fighters tried to intercept him, and Teddy dropped them both with shots that she felt more than aimed. Croft reached the medical station door and disappeared inside. 19 rounds, Okafor counted, and at least 20 fighters still out there. Then I need to make every shot count. Teddy pulled herself into a sitting position against the water tower's base, using the metal struts for support. She raised her rifle and scanned the compound through her scope. Tell me what you see. Okafor peered into the darkness. Movement on the eastern slope. For maybe 5 fighters working their way toward the command post. Another group near the motor pool ruins, I count 3. And there is someone on the ridge line with binoculars. He has been watching the whole time. Teddy found a figure on the ridge line. Even at this distance, even through the smoke and chaos, she recognized command presence. The way he stood, the way others positioned themselves around him. This was not a foot soldier. This was the man giving orders. That is their leader, Teddy said. Can you hit him from here? Teddy calculated the distance. 600 meters, maybe more. Uphill shot, wind variable, shooting one-handed while bleeding from multiple wounds. It was the kind of shot she had made before in another life, when she was whole and rested and had time to prepare. Not yet, she admitted. I need to get closer. Okafor stared at her. You can barely walk. Then I will crawl. But first, tell me about the group near the command post. They worked together for the next 10 minutes, Okafor spotting and Teddy shooting. For more fighters fell before the others realized they were being targeted from the water tower. By then, Teddy had shifted positions again, dragging herself through the shadows with Okafor's help, leaving a trail of blood that she tried not to think about. 15 rounds remaining when Okafor grabbed her arm and pointed toward the medical station. Something is wrong. Teddy looked. Fighters were converging on the medical station from 2 directions, moving with purpose, ignoring other targets. They were not trying to take the compound anymore. They were focused on a single objective. They want hostages, Teddy realized. If they cannot win the fight, they will take prisoners. Your friend Croft is in there, Okafor said. So is Gunny Fisk and a dozen wounded Marines. Teddy started moving toward the medical station, but Okafor stopped her. Wait, the spotter on the ridgeline. He is talking on a radio, and now he is pointing toward us. I think he made us. Teddy found the leader in her scope again. He was indeed pointing in their direction, speaking rapidly into a handheld radio. As she watched, he lowered the radio and raised his binoculars, staring directly at her position. For a long moment, they looked at each other across 600 meters of darkness and death. Then a voice crackled over the radio frequency that Teddy had been monitoring. The voice spoke in accented English, clear and deliberate, meant to be heard. I know you're out there, Ghost. I have waited 3 years for this Christmas. Okafor's face went pale. He knows you. Teddy did not respond. She was staring at the figure on the ridgeline, and memories were flooding back. Syria. A convoy. A man named Farhad Mohammadi who ran a network that trafficked children to the highest bidder. She had killed him on Christmas Eve, a gift to the dozens of families whose children had been stolen. His brother, Teddy said quietly, the leader up there. His name is Qasser Mohammadi. I killed his brother 3 years ago, and now he has found you. No. Teddy's grip tightened on a rifle. He did not find me. Someone told him I was here. Someone gave him this outpost, this date, this target. This attack was never about the Marines. It was about me. The weight of that realization settled over her like a shroud. Thornberry was dead because of her. The Marines in the motor pool had nearly died because of her. Every drop of blood spilled tonight was on her hands, because 3 years ago she had not died when she was supposed to. Qasser's voice came over the radio again. Come out, Ghost. Face me. or I will kill every Marine in that medical station one by one until you do. Okafor looked at Teddy with something between horror and understanding. What are you going to do? Teddy ejected her magazine, counted the rounds, and slammed it back into place. 14 bullets for a man who had brought 40 fighters to kill her. I'm going to finish what I started, she said. Okafor grabbed Teddy's arm before she could move. You cannot just walk out there. That is exactly what he wants. I know what he wants. Teddy checked her rifle one more time, a ritual that steadied her hands and focused her mind. He wants me dead. He wants to watch me die the way I watched his brother die through my scope 3 years ago. Then why give him that satisfaction? Because if I do not, he will start executing hostages. Teddy met Okafor's eyes. I have 14 rounds. He has maybe 20 fighters left, plus himself. Those are not good odds, but they are better than the odds those wounded Marines have if I do nothing. Okafor shook her head. There has to be another way. We can call for support, wait for reinforcements. QRF is at least 40 minutes out, assuming anyone even got a distress call through before the radio tower went down. Teddy glanced toward the medical station. Castor will not wait 40 minutes. The weight of command settled over Teddy like a familiar burden. She had led teams before, made decisions that sent people into danger, accepted responsibility for lives that were not her own. But those had been trained operators who understood the risks. Okafor was a lance corporal who had never fired a weapon at another human being until tonight. You do not have to come with me, Teddy said. You have done enough. Okafor was quiet for a long moment. Then she checked the sidearm Teddy had given her earlier and chamber round. My grandmother came to this country from Nigeria with nothing. She cleaned office buildings for 30 years so my mother could go to college. My mother worked 2 jobs so I could have choices. I joined the Marines because I wanted to protect people who cannot protect themselves. She looked at Teddy with steady eyes. Those wounded Marines cannot protect themselves. So I am coming with you. Teddy nodded. Something that might have been gratitude flickered through her chest, quickly suppressed. Stay behind me. Move when I move. Stop when I stop. If I go down, you get to the medical station and you hold that door until help arrives. They moved through the compound like shadows, using burning vehicles and collapsed structures for cover. Teddy's shoulder screamed with every motion, but she had learned long ago to compartmentalize pain, to store it in a corner of her mind where it could not interfere with the mission. She would pay for that later, assuming there was a later. The enemy had consolidated around the medical station, a dozen fighters forming a perimeter while others prepared to breach. Castor remained on the ridgeline, watching through his binoculars, directing his men like chess pieces on a board. Teddy found a position behind an overturned supply truck 50 meters from the medical station. From here, she could see 8 fighters clearly, with 4 more in partial cover. Castor was still too far for a reliable shot with her wounded arm, but his men were not. I'm going to thin the perimeter, she whispered to Okafor. Call my targets. 2 fighters near the east corner. One is kneeling, one standing. Teddy found them in her scope. The standing fighter first, then the kneeling one before he could react. 2 shots, 2 bodies falling. 12 rounds. The remaining fighters scattered, searching for the source of the gunfire. Teddy had already shifted position, moving to the other side of the truck. 3 more by the medical station door, Okafor reported. They're trying to break through. Teddy sighted on the closest one, a large man with a sledgehammer raised to strike the door. She fired, and he dropped the hammer on his own foot as he fell. The second fighter turned toward her muzzle flash, and she put him down before he could raise his weapon. The third dove behind a concrete barrier. 9 rounds. Castor's voice crackled over the radio again. You're only delaying the inevitable, Ghost. For every one of my men you kill, I will execute 2 of your precious Marines when this is over. He is bluffing, Okafor said. He needs hostages alive to have leverage. Maybe. Teddy watched the remaining fighters regroup. But maybe not. Men like Castor do not think like soldiers. They think like men with nothing left to lose. She remembered reading Castor's file years ago, back when she was still hunting his brother. Castor had been a schoolteacher before the war, a man who believed in education and progress. Then an American airstrike had killed his wife and 2 daughters. Collateral damage the report had called it. Acceptable losses in the pursuit of a high-value target. After that, Kasser had become something else entirely. The medical station door burst open from the inside, and Gunnery Sergeant Fisk appeared in the doorway with a rifle in his hands. His uniform was soaked with blood, his face pale from blood loss, but his voice carried across the compound with the authority of 2 decades of command. "You want hostages?" he roared at the surrounding fighters. "You come through me." "No, délivre." 2 fighters rushed the door. Fisk dropped one, but the second tackled him back into the building. More fighters surged forward, sensing opportunity. Teddy stopped thinking and started shooting. One fighter down at 30 meters. Another at 40. A third who was climbing through a window. 6 rounds. Okafor fired beside her, not hitting anything but adding to the chaos. Inside the medical station, Teddy could hear shouting, struggling, the sounds of close combat. Then Croft's voice, high and desperate. "Get off him! Get off him!" Teddy was moving before she made the conscious decision. She crossed the open ground in seconds, ignoring the fire that tracked her movement, ignoring the pain that threatened to shut down her body. She reached the medical station door and went through it without slowing. Inside was chaos. Fisk was on the ground, wrestling with a fighter twice his size. Croft was trying to pull another fighter off a wounded Marine. Staff Sergeant Briggs had a chair raised over her head, ready to bring it down on anyone who came close. Teddy shot the fighter on top of Fisk. Then she shot the one Croft was struggling with. Then she turned and shot the one who had followed her through the door. 3 rounds. The room went quiet except for the heavy breathing of survivors. Fisk looked up at Teddy from the floor, blood trickling from a gash on his temple. And for the first time since she had arrived at this outpost, he saw her clearly. "Supply clerk," he said, his voice somewhere between wonder and accusation. "You're no supply clerk." "No," Teddy agreed. "I'm not." Outside, Kasser's voice came over the radio one final time. "Enough games, Ghost. I'm coming down. Let us finish this face to face." The medical station fell silent as Teddy moved to the window. Outside, she could see Kasser descending from the ridgeline, flanked by his remaining fighters. She counted them quickly. 15 men, plus Kasser himself. 15 fighters against 3 rounds and a roomful of wounded Marines. Gunnery Sergeant Fisk pulled himself to his feet, swaying but refusing to fall. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded. "And I want a real answer this time." Teddy kept her eyes on the approaching enemy. "My name is not important. What matters is that every fighter out there came here because of me. This attack, the deaths tonight, all of it traces back to something I did 3 years ago." Fisk processed this information with the calm of a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "That man on the radio. He called you Ghost. That was my call sign. A long time ago." "CIA," Fisk said. "It was not a question. I serve with agency operators in Fallujah. I know the type." Teddy did not confirm or deny. She was calculating distances, angles, the time it would take Kasser's group to reach the medical station. For minutes, maybe 5. Not enough time to fortify, not enough ammunition to hold. Staff Sergeant Briggs moved to stand beside Fisk. "Whatever she did before, Gunny, she saved our lives tonight. That counts for something." "It counts for everything," Croft added. He was pressing a bandage against a wounded Marine's chest, his hands steady despite the fear in his eyes. "I would be dead 3 times over if not for her." Fisk looked at Teddy for a long moment. Then he nodded. "What do you need?" "A distraction," Teddy said. "Something to draw their attention while I flank. And I need everyone who can hold a weapon ready to defend this position." Briggs began organizing the able-bodied Marines, while Fisk checked the ammunition count. It was not encouraging. 2 rifles with partial magazines, 3 sidearms, and a shotgun that one of the wounded had been carrying when the attack began. Okafor appeared at Teddy's side. "You are going out there alone. I'm going to circle behind them while you keep them focused on this building. When Kasser get close enough, I will take the shot." With 3 rounds. Against 15 fighters and a man who has been planning your death for 3 years. Okafor shook her head. "That is not a plan. That is suicide with extra steps." Teddy almost smiled. "I have survived worse odds." She moved toward the back exit, but Okafor caught her arm. The younger woman pressed something into Teddy's hand. The sidearm, with its remaining rounds. 7 shots, Okafor said. It is not much, but it is something. Teddy looked at the weapon, then at Okafor. You might need this to defend the station. We have other weapons. You have nothing except that rifle and 3 bullets. Okafor's jaw tightened. Besides, someone has to make sure you come back. You have a daughter waiting for you. The words hit Teddy harder than any bullet. She had spent 3 years convincing herself that staying dead was the right choice, that her daughter was safer without her, that the ghost needed to stay buried. But standing here, surrounded by people who were willing to die beside her, she felt the weight of that lie crushing her chest. I have not seen her since she was 4, Teddy said quietly. She is 7 now. She probably does not even remember my face. Then you better survive tonight so you can remind her. Teddy tucked the sidearm into her belt and moved to the back door. Outside, the compound was a wasteland of burning vehicles, collapsed structures, and scattered bodies. Somewhere in that darkness, Kasser and his men were advancing. She had maybe 3 minutes to get into position. She slipped through the door and disappeared into the night. Moving through the compound was agony. Her shoulder had gone from screaming to a dull, persistent throb that made her wonder how much blood she had lost. Her left arm was completely useless now, hanging at her side like dead weight. She compensated by bracing her rifle against debris when she needed to aim, using the environment to steady what her body could not. She circled wide, staying in the shadows, moving toward the eastern edge of the compound where a collapsed guard tower provided elevation and cover. From there, she would have a clear line of sight to the medical station approach. From there, she could see Kasser. She reached the tower ruins and climbed the debris pile with her one good arm, fighting back sounds of pain with every movement. At the top, she found a stable position and raised her rifle. Kasser's group had reached the center of the compound. They moved in a tactical formation, weapons sweeping, clearly expecting an ambush. But their attention was focused on the medical station ahead, not on the ruins behind them. Teddy found Kasser in her scope. He walked at the center of the formation, protected by fighters on all sides. A clean shot was impossible. She would have to wait until he moved, until his men shifted, until opportunity presented itself. Through her scope, she watched him raise a radio to his mouth. Last chance, Ghost. Come out now, and I will let these Marines live. Make me come in there, and I will burn them alive like your people burn my family. His voice carried across the compound. Amplified by the radio, Okafor was monitoring inside the medical station. Teddy saw movement at the station windows. The Marines were preparing to fight. Kasser gestured, and his fighters spread out, preparing to assault the building from multiple angles. In 30 seconds, they would breach. In 30 seconds, Marines would die. Teddy had 3 rounds and 15 targets. She made her choice. The first shot took the fighter on Kasser's immediate right, the man who was shielding him from her angle. The body fell, and for one heartbeat, Kasser was exposed. Teddy shifted her aim and fired. The round caught Kasser in the shoulder, spinning him around, but not dropping him. He was wearing body armor beneath his clothes, and her angle had not been clean enough to find the gap. 1 round remaining. Kasser's fighters opened fire on her position, rounds tearing through the debris pile, forcing her to duck. When she raised her head again, Kasser was being dragged toward cover by 2 of his men, blood streaming from his shoulder, his face twisted with rage. Ghost, he screamed. I will find you. I will kill everyone you have ever loved. Teddy chambered her last round and waited for a clear shot that did not come. Teddy dropped from the debris pile as bullets shredded the position where she had been lying. She hit the ground hard, her wounded shoulder taking the impact, and for a moment the world went white with pain. Then training took over, and she was moving, scrambling through the ruins, putting distance between herself and the fighters converging on her location. She had 1 rifle round and 7 pistol shots. Kasser had at least 12 fighters still standing, plus himself. The mathematics had not improved, but Kasser was wounded now, bleeding, and wounded men made mistakes. Teddy circled through the wreckage of what had been the motor pool, using burned-out vehicles for cover. She could hear Kasser shouting orders in Pashto, directing his men to spread out and find her. They were hunting her now, moving through the compound in pairs, checking every shadow. She let the first pair pass her position, pressed flat beneath a collapsed roof section. The second pair she could not avoid. They came around the corner of a destroyed Humvee and spotted her immediately. Teddy drew the sidearm and fired twice. Both fighters dropped. 5 pistol rounds remaining. The gunshots gave away her position. More fighters converged, and Teddy ran, weaving through the destruction, heading toward the one place Kasser would not expect her to go. Toward him. She found him near the command post, leaning against a concrete barrier while one of his men tried to bandage his shoulder. 4 fighters stood guard around him, weapons pointed outward, scanning for threats. Kasser's face was pale with blood loss, but his eyes burned with hatred. Teddy studied the scene from behind a demolished supply shed. 4 guards, plus the one treating Kasser. 5 targets. She had 5 pistol rounds and 1 rifle shot. If she was perfect, if every bullet found its mark, she could end this now. But she was not perfect. She was exhausted, wounded, shooting with her offhand because her dominant arm no longer worked. The odds of hitting 5 moving targets with 5 rounds were close to 0. She needed another way. Her eyes fell on the generator beside the command post. It was still running, somehow intact despite the battle, providing power to the compound's emergency systems. A fuel line ran from a tank nearby, feeding the generator's constant hunger. Teddy aimed her rifle at the fuel tank and fired her last round. The explosion was not large, but it was enough. The generator erupted in a ball of flame, showering Kasser's position with burning fuel and debris. His guards scattered, 2 of them on fire, screaming as they tried to extinguish the flames consuming their clothes. Teddy moved through the chaos like a wraith. She shot the first burning fighter to end his suffering and her need for stealth. She shot the second as he stumbled toward a water tank. She shot the third as he raised his weapon in her direction. 2 pistol rounds remaining. The fighter who had been treating Kasser came at her with a knife, having lost his rifle in the explosion. Teddy sidestepped his lunge, trapped his arm, and broke it with a technique she had learned in a basement in Virginia a lifetime ago. He went down screaming, and she left him there. Kasser was alone now, struggling to rise from where the explosion had thrown him. His shoulder wound had reopened, blood soaking through the hasty bandage. He saw Teddy approaching and reached for his sidearm with his good hand. She shot out his grip before he could raise it. 1 round remaining. Kasser laughed, a wet, painful sound that bubbled with blood. "You could have killed me with that shot." "I could have." Teddy stopped 3 meters from him, her pistol steady despite the exhaustion threatening to drag her down. "But you're going to answer questions first. Who told you I was here? Who gave you this outpost?" Kasser's smile was a bloody ruin. "Does it matter? You killed my brother. You took everything from me. I found a way to take everything from you. Your brother ran a network that sold children." Teddy's voice was cold. "Little girls, little boys, sold to men who did things to them that you cannot imagine. I killed him because he deserved to die." Something flickered in Kasser's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or the first crack in a story he had told himself for 3 years. "My brother was a businessman," Kasser said, but the conviction had drained from his voice. "He provided for our family after the Americans killed our parents. Your brother was a monster." Teddy stepped closer. "I have the files. I have the photographs. I have testimony from children who survived his markets. Is it the man you destroyed your soul to avenge?" Kasser was silent, his hand pressed against his bleeding shoulder, and for a moment he looked less like a warlord and more like the schoolteacher he had once been, a man who had lost everything and filled the void with hatred. "It does not matter," he finally said. "What I have done cannot be undone. The blood on my hands cannot be washed away." "No," Teddy agreed. "It cannot." Behind her, she heard movement. The surviving fighters, 7 or 8 of them, were converging on the command post. They had heard the explosion, heard the gunshots, and now they were coming to save their leader or avenge him. Teddy had 1 bullet. She could kill Kasser and die fighting his men. or she could let him live and try to survive. She thought of Noelle, 7 years old now, probably asleep in her bed, dreaming of Christmas morning, dreaming of presents and candy and all the small joys that children deserved. Not knowing that somewhere in Afghanistan, her mother was deciding whether to die for revenge or live for love. "Put your hands behind your head," Teddy said. Slowly, Casser stared at her. "You are not going to kill me. I'm going to do something worse." She kept her pistol trained on him as she backed toward the medical station. "I'm going to let you live. Let you stand trial. Let the world hear what your brother really was and what you became trying to avenge him." The first fighter rounded the corner, and Teddy fired her last round into his chest. Then she turned and ran, leaving Casser bleeding on the ground behind her. She reached the medical station door just as the remaining fighters opened fire. Hands grabbed her and pulled her inside, and she fell into darkness. Teddy woke to the sound of helicopter rotors. She was lying on the floor of the medical station, her head resting on a folded jacket, her shoulder wrapped in bandages that had already soaked through with blood. Okafor knelt beside her, pressing a fresh dressing against the wound. "Stay still," Okafor said. "You lost a lot of blood. The medic says you should be dead." Teddy tried to sit up anyway. The room spun, and she fell back. "What happened? How long was I out?" 20 minutes. Maybe less. Okafor glanced toward the window. "The QRF is here. 4 helicopters landed 5 minutes ago. The remaining fighters scattered when they heard them coming." "Casser?" "They found him where you left him. Alive. He is being loaded onto a helicopter now." Teddy closed her eyes. She made the right choice. Letting him live meant he would face justice, meant the truth about his brother would come out in open court, meant he would spend the rest of his days knowing that his crusade had been built on lies. Death would have been a mercy. This was punishment. The medical station door opened, and Gunnery Sergeant Fisk limped inside. He looked like death warmed over, his uniform more red than green, his face gray with blood loss. But he was standing, and in his eyes was something that might have been respect. "QRF commander wants to debrief you," he said to Teddy. "I told him you were unconscious. Bought you maybe 10 minutes before he comes in here himself." "Thank you." Fisk lowered himself onto a crate with a grunt of pain. 23 years in the Corps. I have seen things that would turn most people's hair white, but I have never seen anything like what you did tonight." Teddy said nothing. There was nothing to say. 17 confirmed kills, Fisk continued. Probably more we have not found yet. Single-handedly broke an assault that should have overrun us in the first 5 minutes. He shook his head. "When this is over, when the paperwork is done and the medals are handed out, I want to know who you really are. Not the classified version. The real story." "Maybe someday," Teddy said. The door opened again, and this time the man who entered wore the insignia of a lieutenant colonel. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had spent decades in places that did not officially exist. His eyes swept the room until they found Teddy, and then he went very still. She recognized him instantly. The face was older, the hair grayer, but the eyes were the same. Cold, calculating, always 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the room. "Hello, Marcus," she said. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb had been her handler during her years with the agency. He had recruited her out of Army sniper school, trained her, deployed her to places where official American forces could not go. He had also been the one to tell her that her cover was blown, that her enemies had learned her identity, that the only way to protect her daughter was to die. He had been on the helicopter that supposedly crashed in Yemen. He had helped her vanish. "Theodora," he said quietly. His voice carried a weight that made everyone else in the room tense. "You were supposed to be dead." "I was." Teddy met his gaze. "Until tonight." Webb turned to Fisk and the other Marines. "I need the room. Now." Fisk started to protest, but Okafor put a hand on his arm. She helped Teddy sit up first, propping her against the wall, then followed the others out. The door closed, and Teddy was alone with the man who had once controlled every aspect of her life. Webb pulled a chair close and sat down. His face was unreadable. "How much do they know?" "Nothing specific. They know I can shoot. They know I am not who I claim to be. But names, operations, none of that." "Good. We can contain this." Webb leaned forward. What happened here tonight stays classified. You will be extracted, given a new identity, relocated somewhere the enemy cannot find you. No. The word hung in the air between them. Webb blinked, the first crack in his composure. Theodora, he said carefully, you do not have a choice. You are a ghost. Ghosts do not get to come back to life. Teddy thought of Noel. Thought of 3 years of birthdays missed, 3 years of bedtime stories never told, 3 years of watching her daughter grow up through photographs that arrived in anonymous packages every few months. My daughter thinks I am dead, she said. She has thought that for 3 years. She has grown up without a mother because I was too afraid to fight for her. You were protecting her. I was hiding. Teddy's voice hardened. And while I was hiding, men like Kasser were hunting me anyway. They found me. Marcus. They found me at a random outpost in Afghanistan because someone told them where I was. Webb's expression flickered. We are looking into the leak. I do not care about the leak. Teddy pushed herself straighter against the wall, ignoring the pain that flared through her shoulder. I care about my daughter. I care about the fact that I spent 3 years being dead, and she has spent 3 years being an orphan, and none of it kept me safe anyway. What are you asking for? I want my life back. I want to see my daughter. I want to stop running. Webb was silent for a long moment. Outside, the helicopters were powering down, their rotors slowing to a rhythmic whump that pulsed through the walls. It is not that simple, he finally said. Then make it simple. Teddy held his gaze. You owe me that much. The door opened before Webb could respond, and a young soldier stepped inside. Sir, we have a situation. The prisoner is asking to speak with someone. He is asking for the ghost. Webb looked at Teddy. She was already struggling to her feet. Help me up, she said. I'm not done with him yet. They had Kasser in the back of a medical transport helicopter, his wrists bound with zip ties, his shoulder wrapped in battlefield dressings. 2 soldiers stood guard over him, their weapons ready, but the fight had gone out of him. He looked smaller now, diminished, a man who had wagered everything on revenge and lost. Teddy climbed into the helicopter with Webb's reluctant assistance. Her legs barely supported her weight, and her vision kept threatening to gray out at the edges, but she would not show weakness in front of the man who had tried to destroy her. Kasser looked up as she entered. His eyes, which had burned with such hatred an hour ago, now held something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or the exhaustion of a man who had finally reached the end of his road. You came, he said. I was not sure you would. You asked for me. Teddy lowered herself onto a bench across from him, keeping her wounded arm pressed against her side. What do you want? Kasser was silent for a moment, studying her face as if memorizing it. I spent 3 years dreaming of this night, he said finally. 3 years planning how I would watch you die, how I would make you suffer the way I suffered when you took my brother. And now I am wondering if any of it was worth it. Teddy waited. She had interrogated enough men to know when someone needed to talk, needed to unburden themselves of truths they had carried too long. You said my brother sold children. Kasser's voice cracked on the last word. I did not believe you. I thought it was American lies, propaganda to justify murder. But on the helicopter, one of your soldiers showed me his phone. News articles, court documents, photographs. He closed his eyes. Photographs of children. Children who testified about what was done to them. Children who named my brother as the man who sold them. I am sorry, Teddy said, and she meant it. Not for killing Farhad. She would do that again without hesitation. But she was sorry that Kasser had built his entire identity around avenging a man who did not deserve to be mourned. I became a monster, Kasser whispered. I killed innocent people. I attacked your outpost, knowing there would be casualties who had nothing to do with you. I did all of this for a man who sold children. Yes. Teddy's voice was gentle, but unflinching. You did. Kasser opened his eyes and looked at her. How do you live with it? The things you have done. The people you have killed. I do not think about living with it. I think about why I did it. Teddy leaned forward slightly. Every person I killed was a choice. Every target was someone who was hurting innocents. I do not enjoy killing, but I accept that some people need to be stopped, and I have the skills to stop them. And my brother was one of those people. Your brother was a monster. You were a schoolteacher who lost his family, and let grief turn him into something almost as bad. The difference is that you still have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life in a cell feeling sorry for yourself, or you can find a way to make amends for what you have done. How? Castor laughed bitterly. How does someone make amends for what I have done? You start by telling the truth. About the networks your brother built. About the people who are still running them. About everything you learned while you were hunting me. Castor stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. There is a man, he said. An American. He is the one who told me where to find you. He said you killed his partner in Yemen, and he wanted you dead as much as I did. Teddy felt something cold settle in her stomach. A name. Give me a name. I only knew him as a voice on the phone, but he had access to information that only someone inside your government would have. He knew your real identity. He knew about your daughter. He knew exactly where you were stationed. Webb had been listening from outside the helicopter. He stepped forward now, his face grim. We will find him, he said. Whoever leaked your location, we will find him and we will deal with him. Teddy looked at Castor one last time. For 3 years, she had thought of him as a faceless enemy, a threat lurking somewhere beyond the walls of her self-imposed prison. Now she saw him for what he really was, a broken man who had let his grief destroy him. Thank you, she said, for telling me the truth. She turned and climbed out of the helicopter. The sun was beginning to rise over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Christmas morning. She had survived. Okafor was waiting for her on the tarmac. So was Fisk, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch. Briggs stood behind them with Croft and the other Marines who could still walk. They had formed a line, a ragged honor guard for a woman they had known as a supply clerk 12 hours ago. Gunny, Teddy said, you should be lying down. Fisk shook his head. Not until I say what needs to be said. He straightened as much as his wounds would allow. I do not know who you are. I do not know where you came from or where you are going. But I know what you did tonight. You saved this outpost. You saved my Marines. And as far as I am concerned, that makes you one of us. The other Marines murmured agreement. Croft stepped forward, his eyes bright with emotion. You helped me write that letter to my mother, he said. You did not have to do that. You did not have to save me in the alley, or shield me from the mortar, or any of it. But you did. Teddy felt something break open her chest. For 3 years, she had kept everyone at arm's length, convinced that connection meant danger, that caring meant vulnerability. But these people had fought beside her, bled beside her, and now they were standing in the dawn light telling her that she mattered. Thank you, she said. Her voice was rough. All of you. Webb appeared at her elbow. We need to get you to a hospital. That shoulder needs surgery. In a minute. Teddy looked at the faces around her, memorizing each one. First, I need to make a phone call. Webb handed her a satellite phone without argument. He understood what this call meant, understood that 3 years of silence were about to end. He stepped back and gave her space, and Teddy walked to the edge of the tarmac where the morning sun was warming the cold mountain air. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number. She had memorized it years ago, back when she first went into hiding, back when she thought the separation would last months instead of years. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice answered, groggy with sleep but instantly familiar. Hello, Grace. Teddy's throat tightened around her sister's name. It is me. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. Teddy? Oh my God. Teddy, is that really you? It is really me. I am alive. I am sorry I could not tell you before. I am sorry for everything. Grace started crying, the kind of deep, racking sobs that came from years of grief suddenly transformed into something else. We thought you were dead. The funeral, the flag, Noel asking why Mommy was not coming home. 3 years, Teddy. 3 years of telling that little girl that her mother was a hero who died serving her country. I know. Teddy's own tears were falling now, cutting tracks through the dirt and blood on her face. I know, and I'm so sorry. But I'm coming home. For real this time. I'm coming home, and I am never leaving her again. She's going to be so confused. Grace's voice was steadying, the practical older sister emerging through the shock. She is 7 now. She barely remembers you. Then I will help her remember. Is she there? Can I talk to her? She is still asleep. It is Christmas morning. She was up late waiting for Santa. Teddy laughed through her tears. Of course she was. Hold on. I will wake her. She deserves this present more than anything under the tree. The phone rustled, and Teddy heard footsteps, a door opening, gentle words being spoken. Then a small voice, thick with sleep. Aunt Grace, what is happening? There is someone on the phone who wants to talk to you, sweetheart. Someone very special. More rustling. Then the voice again, clearer now. Hello. Teddy could not speak. The words she wanted to say, the name she had whispered to herself every night for 3 years, stuck in her throat like a stone. Hello. The little voice was uncertain. Who is this? Teddy forced the word out. Noelle. Baby, it is Mommy. The silence that followed lasted an eternity. Teddy gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white, terrified that her daughter would not remember, would not believe, would reject this stranger claiming to be the mother who had abandoned her. Then, very quietly, Mommy died. I know that is what they told you, honey, and I'm so sorry. But I did not die. I had to go away for a very long time to keep you safe. But I'm coming home now. I'm coming home to you. Another silence. Teddy could hear breathing, could imagine the confusion on her daughter's face. Mommy used to tell me a story, Noelle said finally, about a snow princess who lived in a castle made of ice. She said she would tell it to me every Christmas until I was old enough to tell it myself. Teddy's heart stopped. She remembered that story. She had made it up when Noelle was 2, a tale about a princess named Winter who learned that the coldest heart could be melted by love. She had told it every Christmas Eve, embellishing it each year, adding new adventures and characters. The Snow Princess, Teddy said slowly, lived in a castle at the top of the world, where the northern lights danced every night. Her name was Winter, and she had hair as white as fresh snow and eyes as blue as frozen lakes. And she was lonely, Noelle continued, her voice rising with wonder, because everyone was afraid of her magic. But one day, a little girl wandered into her kingdom, a girl who was not afraid. Teddy was crying openly now, and the princess realized that her magic was not something to fear. It was something to share. The princess melted her castle, Noelle said. She came down from the mountain to live with the people who loved her. Yes, baby, she did. Mommy? The word came out broken, disbelieving, hopeful. Is it really you? It is really me, Noelle. I'm so sorry I was gone so long. But I'm coming home. I promise. I am coming home. She heard her daughter start to cry, heard Grace gathering the girl into her arms, heard her sister's voice murmuring comfort and reassurance. The phone changed hands again. When? Grace asked. When will you be here? Soon. A few days. I have to get patched up first, but then I am on the first flight home. We will be waiting. The call ended, and Teddy stood alone on the tarmac, the satellite phone pressed against her chest, the sun warming her face. She had spent 3 years in the cold, 3 years pretending to be dead, 3 years running from enemies who found her anyway. But now, standing in the Christmas morning light, she felt something she had not felt since before Yemen. She felt hope. 1 month later, Teddy stood on the porch of her sister's house in Vermont. Snow covered the ground in pristine white sheets, and colored lights twinkled from the eaves. Inside, she could hear laughter, music, the sounds of a family gathering. She had spent 3 weeks in a military hospital, 2 surgeries to repair her shoulder, countless debriefings with Webb and his team. The mole had been identified and arrested, a mid-level analyst who had lost his brother in the same operation where Teddy had supposedly died. Revenge, it seemed, was a disease that infected everyone it touched. The door opened, and Noelle stood there. 7 years old, dark hair like her mother's, eyes that held the same guarded intensity Teddy saw in the mirror. Hi, Teddy said. Noelle Raplia. They stood looking at each other for a moment. Then Noelle stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Teddy's waist. I knew you would come back, she whispered. The Snow Princess always comes home. Teddy held her daughter for the first time in 3 years and let the tears fall freely. Inside, the house was warm and full of life. Okafor was there along with Croft and Briggs and half a dozen other Marines from Outpost Kestrel. They had stayed in touch, bound together by a Christmas Eve that none of them would ever forget. Fisk raised a glass when Teddy entered. "To fallen friends," he said, "and to the ghost who saved the rest of us." They drank together, laughed together, shared stories of the battle and the long recovery afterward. And when the night grew late and the others began to leave, Noelle curled up beside Teddy on the couch, already half asleep. "Mommy," she murmured, "what do you want for Christmas?" Teddy looked down at her daughter, at the face she had dreamed of for 3 years, at the miracle she had almost lost forever. "I already have it," she said. "If this story moved you, drop a comment and tell us your favorite moment. Maybe you connected with Teddy's sacrifice, or Noelle's faith that her mother would return. Or perhaps you know someone who has shown hidden strength when it mattered most. We would love to hear your story.